Howdy. Welcome to the Texas A&M University College of Veterinary Medicine and Biomedical Sciences Peer Programs STEM Education Series. Today, Dr. Barbara Gastel will present What Would You Do? Case Studies in Science and Ethics. Decision-making within the world of scientific research and publication is not always black or white, and scientists must be able to not only avoid the wrong decisions, but also make the right ones. Dr. Gastel will help us navigate those gray areas as she presents ethical scenarios found in high school, college, and the professional workplace. Welcome, Dr. Gastel.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here today. First of all, let me present a little bit of an overview about what I'll discuss. I'll first say a little bit about myself and my type of career. Then I'm going to introduce the topic of ethics in science. The main part of this session will be discussion of some cases, and this will be interactive, and we'll ask what you would do in these situations. We'll then talk about some principles related to these cases, and I'll introduce some resources in case you'd like to know more about the topic. I'll then, as we near the end, have a treat for you, some photographs from professionally related travel that I have done. And then I hope that at the end there will be a little extra time for questions and answers. I also want you to feel free to ask questions along the way. So first of all, a little bit about me. My area is really the communication of science, and I've long been interested in both science and writing. And some of you already may be thinking about careers or may have friends who are and might be thinking, well, you have to either have a science career or a writing career. Actually, one can combine both, and so I combined both in my field, have worked in science journalism and other science communication, and now I'm a professor at Texas A&M University, and I coordinate a program that teaches students to write about science. If you're interested in a career in science communication, please feel free to be in touch with me. It's not too early. Just last week, I heard from a family that had a high school student who might be interested in science journalism and had some questions for me. I should also mention that a related interest of mine, ever since I was a student, has been ethics in science. And at our College of Medicine, that's one of the things that I sometimes teach. So I'm really happy to be here today. And this is a picture of me giving a presentation over in Sri Lanka, in Asia. A lot of my work consists of international work in this field, and therefore I'll have some international pictures to show you. And just as a taste of them, here is one of them. This was taken in Kenya, where I visited a giraffe breeding facility, and they let me feed some of the giraffes. And maybe you're wondering, how can I be feeding giraffes? I'm certainly not giraffe height. I suspect you have your hypotheses, and if you said it's because I'm up on the second story, that's correct. There was a special giraffe feeding building that had a balcony on the second story. So, first of all, let's talk about, well, what is ethics in science? Ethics in science is basically responsible conduct. In other words, behaving yourself in an appropriate, moral, ethical way. And it's consistent with general moral principles, for example, being honest, and also with norms in science, basic ways of doing things in science, for example, giving credit to people for their work. Sometimes how to be ethical in science isn't clear-cut. For example, there may be two values that are competing with each other, and so there can be dilemmas, and today we'll talk about some of those dilemmas and how you might approach them. But ethics in science, I think, is really important it's basic to the integrity of science. In other words, it's basic to having science work as it should, because science is supposed to uncover the truth. And for example, if you're not truthful, science doesn't work. It also is important to the image of science in society, because if scientists aren't ethical, then there could be, quite rightly, decreased respect by the public.
Dr. Gastel, we already have a question.
Wonderful.
And they want to know, are morals and scientific norms consistent throughout the world?
That is a wonderful question. I would say that among international type of research, they have become pretty much consistent, but different places have different traditions. For example, we talked about giving credit. In the United States, we're very strict that if we're using someone else's work, we give credit. In some other countries, there's not the same tradition. And so sometimes there have been inconsistencies. And later, I will show you a book that was an international book that had authors from many countries who tried to come together and decide on international scientific norms for ethics. So thank you for a great question.
Right.
Okay, why don't we proceed to some cases. And in each case, I will have a case about students and then a somewhat similar or analogous case about researchers later in their careers. So first of all, we're talking about high school student A, and this high school student's been very busy. She's taking a heavy course load, she's on a sports team, and her relatives have been visiting. She was supposed to be making observations for an ecology project due tomorrow in her biology class, but she's barely started. She thinks she knows what the observations will show, and so she's tempted just to make up the observations so she can complete the project on time. So, you're our student A. What would you do in this situation?
I know we sometimes have a little delay, so we'll give them just a minute to get some thoughts in.
Right, yes. Yes, and these are questions that have no one right answer. There are often a number of good approaches. So I look forward to hearing different thoughts about what you do.
Right, so some students would like to know, would it be okay to find a similar project, maybe online, and report the results found there, or the observations found there?
Yeah, that would be an interesting idea. I think maybe so. I think if so, one would need to be clear about what you're doing. I think pretending they're your own wouldn't be right. I think it might be okay maybe to explain the situation to the teacher and see if the teacher would give permission to do that.
Then we have other students that say that it's not right to make up the observations, that she needs to find the observations or talk to her teacher.
Right, yeah, that's what I think, one way or another, it would be dishonest to make up the observations. So either, taking the time to make up the observations or, asking the teacher for an extension. Yeah, I think those could be good approaches. But don't fake it. I think it's better even to take a decreased grade than to fake it. And here we have a similar case from an actual researcher. And researcher A has been very busy too. He has lots of teaching to do at the university. He does volunteer work in the community, and he has a new child and is helping to take care of the new baby. He's supposed to submit a grant proposal next week to get funding for his research, but he has barely started gathering the preliminary data to include in it. He feels certain that he knows what the data will show, and so he is tempted to make up data to include. Yeah. Now you're researcher A. What should researcher A do? And again, Let me give you a little time. I know this is actually quite relevant here because I know there's a big grant proposal deadline coming up, and some of my colleagues are working on grant proposals and are pressed for time.
So again, we have someone who thinks that maybe you could look at past research he's done or colleagues have done and use that data.
Right, yeah, so that would be good. So possibility would be to cite previous data and being open about the source, but the previous data may be enough to support the case.
And then we have other students who are saying that they have to use the actual data, that you can't use something from another case or another study because then it wouldn't be applicable to their funding.
Right, yeah, so they'd have to make sure that, it would have to be something very closely related and probably wouldn't be as good to have. Right, so were there any other thoughts on what to do?
We have one more, and then they just say that making up data is not right, that it's not going to be the right thing to do, the ethical thing to do.
Right, yeah, no, not the ethical thing to do. And luckily for a lot of grant proposals, there are a series of deadlines. So I think I'd probably advise this person to wait and for the next round and apply then. But I think making up data to include is not the right thing to do, and if discovered, it could really ruin someone's career. I mean, people take many years to build up a good reputation, but just one thing like this can destroy one's reputation and really decrease the chances of future funding. Well, people have been doing great, so let's go to the sum up on this. So the principle here is to use the technical term, avoid fabrication. And fabrication means making things up. So if you're a novelist, you can make things up. But if you're a scientist, you need to present real data. You can't make things up.
So we have a question kind of about the avoiding fabrication. And they want to know what type of damage control is done when false or unethical studies are made public. And they said, like the vaccination study.
Yeah.
And how effective is that damage control?
Wow, that could be an entire lecture. So often, if something is found to be false, it will be publicized. I know, for example, there's a very good blog called Retraction Watch where they'll have corrections and things like that. But one of the problems is once bad information gets out, it sort of has a life of its own. And I think that the person mentioned the vaccination study. That's a perfect example. There was, a bad, untrue, falsified study that, indicated that vaccines cause autism. And it's been a long time since they found, that wasn't true, but still some people remember that study and believe that. So I think, falsified information or fabricated information, can do a lot of damage even after a correction is issued.
Yeah, so damaging not only to a person's career, but to maybe society's thoughts on different things.
Right, and even in case of vaccination, I mean, there have now been children who weren't vaccinated, because of this belief, and who became very ill, or in some cases died. So it's, I think it's a big responsibility.
It's very interesting. Thank you.
And in fact, I think that leads sort of to our next situation, which is somewhat related to that. And here we have college student B, and he's unhappy with the results of his chemistry experiment. He knows from the textbook what the numbers should be, and his numbers are somewhat different. He thinks that the laboratory instructor will be dissatisfied, and so will give him a bad grade. Therefore, he's thinking of changing the numbers somewhat. And again, let's hear what you would do. or what you would advise this college student to do?
Well, as they're thinking, I know that one is a tough one. I know being in that situation is hard because the grades seem so very important at the time, and knowing what to do in that instance is tough.
Right, I think that's a challenging one, and I think it's one that, you know, those of us who've taken a lot of labs in college, we sometimes find ourselves with that dilemma.
Right. So we have some students that are saying to report the data that you get, and then also report things that may have gone wrong with your experiment that would cause those numbers to be different than what they expected them to be.
Yeah, I think that's a great answer, because I think usually the teacher is not so much interested in the exact numbers, they are interested in the thinking of the student. And so the numbers may be not what we're expecting, but then if the student has a good analysis of the reasons for possible difference, that might even get a better grade.
We have other students who want to know, would it be okay if he compared his data with that of lab partners or other classmates, and maybe used some of their data if they did the same experiment?
Possibly, but again, I would be open about it. I think I would ask the lab instructor if that's okay, because, you know, in some courses that's considered good and good analysis. In others, they really want each student to do their own work. So I think I would maybe explore it, you know, ask the teacher if that would be okay.
And we have one more, and they say that maybe they could do the experiment again and see if they get the same results or if they get different results, and report both.
That, I think, would be great. What a good idea to repeat it. And that really is how science often works, because something really important is replicability. And so I think, you know, if there's the opportunity and, you know, the equipment and the reagents are available, I think repeating it, that would be really a good approach. Wow, lots of good ideas on that one. And here we have a similar thing in the working world. Here is scientist B, and she's unhappy with the images that she's obtained in her research. She knows what good such images look like, and hers look somewhat different. And she thinks her supervisor at the company will be dissatisfied, and so will give her less of a raise. Therefore, she's thinking of using Photoshop to alter the images somewhat. And again, what would you do?
Again, in the world we live in today, where it's, so easy to find images online, I imagine that could be a big temptation, and knowing what to do in that situation, if it's okay to use other images or not.
Right, and it's sometimes so easy with Photoshop to just go in, alter something, and make it a little prettier, a little neater.
We have a student that says that maybe you could use a different image and just give credit. If you use someone else's image, give credit to that person that used the image, that you're using the image from, is one idea.
Yeah, that would be one idea. If it, you know, if it didn't have to be an image of her own results, if it's just a more generic or general image, might be to find elsewhere, and if necessary, get permission, and certainly give credit for the source.
And then another one thinks that you could maybe clean it up with Photoshop and then recognize or acknowledge that you did, this is a cleaned up image of
that. Yeah, that is a common way to do it. If it's, you know, just like neatening it up and then have a note about what was done. I think the question is, where's the borderline between cleaning up and changing things? So, for example, improving, let's say, the contrast or something like that is considered appropriate, or adding some color. Whereas, let's say it's a gel, photoshopping another band into the gel would not be considered appropriate, because that would change the findings.
And we have a student that said that you shouldn't change the image at all, that you should publish it as it is, because otherwise you wouldn't be telling the truth about the results that you had.
Right, okay, good. So. And I like to know, on one of the, building on one of the responses to the earlier one, the person who said repeat the experiment, I think another possibility might be, you know, depending on if she can, has the resources and time, would be to repeat what she did and take some new images that are better. So a number of options here, but one of them wouldn't be to majorly alter it with Photoshop. And so here's the principle, the avoiding falsification. In other words, don't change your findings. You know, if you have findings that you think are not good, there are, you know, a number of things you can do, but changing the findings isn't one of them. And our third and final case, we have, again, now we have 3 students and they're working together, and they're supposed to make a group presentation in their engineering course. However, they feel that they're not very good at preparing oral presentations. When they search on the internet, a group member finds an excellent PowerPoint presentation on their subject, and she suggests that the group download it, change a few words, and present it. And so if you were in this situation, what might you do?
Again, that's so easy today, right? It was a little more difficult, I think, when I was a student to have that temptation in front of me. There weren't quite so many resources available, and I know our students today really probably have a lot more temptation than we do.
I think so, in fact. You know, certainly, when I was a student, I wasn't able to download things from the internet.
Yes. So we have a student that says that is plagiarism and it is wrong.
Yes, right, that's plagiarism and that's wrong, absolutely. And were there any other responses?
Let's see. We have, is it okay to use this? So we have a kind of a question to your question. Is it okay to use that presentation if they alter it quite a bit? Maybe use the core of the presentation and they alter it to include their own thoughts or their own findings from whatever they were working on, their engineering project.
I think they could at least use it as a starting point. They could use it as, for example, a model of a good presentation on the subject and get some ideas from it. And then I would say if they do more than get some ideas of it, let's say they adapt one of the slides, then I would put a little credit line on it saying, you know, that slide was adapted from the other one.
Right. And we have one more that says kind of the same thing as the first student, and they said that's not their own work and they shouldn't use it.
Right, yeah, so they can learn from it, but they shouldn't use it. And maybe they should learn more about how to do good PowerPoint presentations. I know here at Texas A&M we have a writing center, and so I think it might be good for them to come to the writing center, get some tips, or again, online rather than downloading someone else's presentation and using it. There are a lot of good resources on how to do a good PowerPoint presentation. So, yeah, so they should not plagiarize the other presentation. And here we have a similar case with some scientists. And there are, again, 3 scientists, and they're writing a journal article about some research they did together. But they feel they're not very good at writing. And they search the internet, and one of the scientists finds a book chapter that describes really well the phenomenon that he and the others are studying. And he suggests that the group include in their article some paragraphs from that chapter. Now, what would you do, or what would you advise these scientists?
And while we're waiting, I don't have a response to that, but I do have a question that says, what exactly is considered to be plagiarism? So I guess they want some more details on what defines plagiarism, what acts can or cannot be done that would be included.
Right. Let me say a little bit, but I will also refer you to the website of the Texas A&M University Writing Center, which you could just Google, and they have some good materials on plagiarism. Plagiarism is basically using other people's words or images or ideas and not giving credit to them. So passing off as your own other people's work. So that would be plagiarism.
So we have another student also again saying that's plagiarism and it can't be done to the answer to our case study. And then we have another comment that says perhaps they could include a portion of it as long as they cite or give credit to the author, give a reference.
Right, so good answer. So this is plagiarism. They can't just take some paragraphs. They should put things in their own words. They might get some ideas from these paragraphs, but put it in their own words. And let's say maybe there's a sentence in there that says something just so beautifully, then they could quote it, but then they would have to put it in quotation marks and would need to cite the source. And then more generally, even if they're using the same different words, if the ideas are from there, they need to cite the source.
And they have a follow-up question about the plagiarism. They want to know if something isn't copyrighted, if they find something on the internet that isn't copyrighted, is it okay to use that information?
You can use information, but copyright and plagiarism are really separate because ethically, copyright is more a legal thing, but ethically, it's not right to use other things without giving credit. So for example, something from the U.S. government materials are not copyrighted. They're considered in the public domain. So anyone can use them without permission, but you still need to give credit. So let's say for your report, you want to use an image, let's say, from the National Institutes of Health. Well, you don't need permission because it belongs to all of us, but you do need to say where it came from. You can't pretend that you are the one who drew that image.
That's a very interesting distinction that probably a lot of our students haven't considered, that just because it's not copyrighted doesn't mean you don't have to acknowledge that you got the information from someone else.
Right, so ethically, you need to give credit to the source of your information. So again, principle, I'm glad someone came up with the word plagiarism, avoid plagiarism. And again, plagiarism, we have definition here, using others' words, images, or ideas or such as your own. So let me put more positively some of the principles. So authenticity, as a scientist, science student, what you present needs to be real. It can't be made up. Accuracy, you need to accurately present. You can't change it. Need to be ethical in your treatment of humans and animals in research. Need to disclose conflicts of interest. So let's say a scientist is studying a new drug, but they have stock in the company that makes the drug, and so they would profit by saying the drug's great. They need to say that so people can take that into consideration. Originality needs to be original work, original words, not plagiarism. Credit, giving credit to your sources, as we've talked about. And so there are other principles too, but these are really the main ones to consider. And I think this ties in with something here at Texas A&M, the Aggie Code of Honor, saying an Aggie does not lie, cheat, or steal, or tolerate those who do. So, one part of it is being ethical in one's scientific work here at Texas A&M. And for those of you who may be from other places and aren't familiar with the term Aggie, Aggie is a term used for Texas A&M University students.
Dr. Gastel, we have a question that's referring back to a previous slide where you talked about ethical treatments of humans and animals, and they want to know what measures are taken to protect people and animals in research.
Yes, there are, for example, federal rules, government rules about how people can be treated in research and how animals can. And if you are doing research on humans and animals, like every university or research institute has a special committee, and you have to submit an application describing how you're going to use the humans and animals in research and what precautions will be taken, and they review it and may request some changes and then approve it. And so then you need their approval. And then let's say you are publishing something about the research. Then you need to, in your report, say what committee has approved it. So variety of safeguards. And in fact, I think some of them are mentioned in the resources that I wanted to mention in case some of you would like to read more. One of them is a wonderful little book called On Being a Scientist, Responsible Conduct in Research. And this entire book is available online through the National Academies. There's also a short video you can watch. And it's written in a very interesting way and actually has a lot of cases in it. So I recommend this book. And someone earlier was asking about, our scientific ethics, the same in different countries. And I had mentioned that there was a book with authors from different countries who got together to talk about sort of the core expectations in science. And so this is called Doing Global Science, and again, provides guideline on scientific ethics to researchers in different countries. And last I checked, it had been or was being translated into some languages other than English, so it would be more accessible. And again, the entire book is available online. And also mention a book on communicating science that I'm one of the authors of. And in this book, part of it is about ethics of scientific communication. And in fact, in some earlier editions, the ethics chapter was near the end. In the recent editions, we decided ethics was so important that we now have a bigger chapter, and it's near the beginning. And so books on scientific writing also often address some aspects of scientific ethics. Let me mention also another resource called Author Aid. This is an international project I work on, and the main goal is to help researchers in developing countries to write about their work and publish their work. But it has lots of resources, and the resources really apply to scientists and science students everywhere, and includes some resources on ethics and also some resources on how to write well. So maybe you won't be tempted to plagiarize because you'll be more confident in your own writing ability.
Before we move on to your travels, we've got a question. They want to know that, let me read it, I wrote it better. Do you, as a female scientist, feel you're provided the same status as your male counterparts, particularly when you're in other countries?
Actually, I feel I've been lucky that way. I've had both male and female mentors and colleagues, and I feel that people have given me respect and good opportunities. And also, I've been impressed in other countries. I mean, even when I've been in countries that were sort of traditionally male-dominated, I felt I was respected, and I've been impressed. Many places I've gone, there have been a lot of women scientists, including in some high positions. And so I feel that, in my experience, actually science has been a good field for a woman to be in, because I felt, in general, I have been judged on the basis of my work, not on other aspects.
That's a wonderful thing to hear. And we have one more question, and they would like to know, do you feel that scientific ethics are generally improving or declining in recent years?
Wow, it is hard to know. Good question about whether they're improving or declining. I think there are pressures in both ways. I think now there's a lot more attention to scientific ethics, and for example, graduate students in many places are required to have training in it, and so I think there's more awareness. I think, unfortunately, there are sometimes more pressures on scientists. For example, there's more competition for research grants and for publication, and so there's more temptation to at least cut corners. I mean, I tend to be a positive person, and so I like to think that scientific ethics is improving somewhat, but still, I mean, there are definitely cases where scientists don't behave ethically. But I hope all of us will contribute to high quality ethics in science.
Right. I think we're ready to move on for now.
Okay, good. So I promised that some glimpses from professionally related travel. These are some places that I've visited either through my author aid work or other work, and maybe some of you have been to them or would like to go to them. Maybe some of your families are from some of these places, or maybe you were born in some of these places. And here is a chart showing some of the places that I have been. And I should also mention, for this presentation today, I am wearing some things from my travels. I have a necklace on that's from Ethiopia, and this scarf is from Bangladesh. And speaking of Bangladesh, that is one place where I've given a number of workshops, and there's a lot of good research being done there and research writing being done there. Another place is Brazil. This is Iguaçu Falls in Brazil. Maybe some of you have studied it, and I was lucky to be giving a workshop near there. Beautiful, beautiful falls. I mean, I grew up near Niagara Falls, and Niagara Falls is lovely, but this is like Niagara Falls many times over. And perhaps not surprisingly, I heard that the world's largest hydroelectric plant is near there, taking advantage of some of this water power to generate electricity. China. I was really, really lucky. I taught for 2 years in China, and this was a while back when there wasn't as much communication between countries. And on a more recent visit, my host took me to a panda breeding facility, and this nice panda posed for me. England, the Author Aid Project, where which I do some work, is based in England, in Oxford, England, and so this is a glimpse from one of the buildings in Oxford. This was taken in Ethiopia, and it shows a schoolyard, and I was so interested because in the schoolyard there were these paintings of digestive system and other systems of the body, so science instruction even there. This was in France, in a beautiful area of France near Switzerland, and that was where the first Author Aid planning meeting was. Hope you're not sleeping. These sleeping lions were taken, picture was taken in Kenya in Nairobi National Park. This picture was taken in Nepal. These were a few people at a workshop, and one of them was demonstrating use of some things on the computer. This picture is from Nicaragua, and it's a volcano that I visited. I learned while I was there that Nicaragua was known as the country of volcanoes and lakes, and so it was really interesting to see some of them. And this was in Pakistan, and it was on a rooftop cafe. This is in Lahore, Pakistan, and there's a street that sometimes is nicknamed Food Street because there's so many good restaurants. And we went up to the top of one of the cafes for a snack and sort of caught the sunset. And this is in Rwanda, and here we have a journalism student who is interviewing one of my colleagues. This was actually there, the journalism students put on some national radio programs, and so he is interviewing her for the program. And this is Sri Lanka, which is a place where I've done quite a bit of work. Beautiful, beautiful country, and actually I'm scheduled to be there next month. And in fact, someone was asking about women in science, and actually my main collaborators there are a team of female scientists who have done very well professionally and have been wonderful collaborators on this project.
So we do have some questions for you.
Excellent.
And the two questions we have are somewhat related. And they want to know, have you ever been involved in, perhaps not personally, but peripherally, or witnessed an unethical research project or publication?
Luckily, I don't think I've personally been involved in that. Let me mention a couple of unethical things. I have unfortunately had some cases where students plagiarized, and they perhaps thought they were going to get away with things. It was clear they, for example, had some paragraphs that were in a very different style from their own, and when I Googled them, came up, and so students had to face some repercussions from the university. I can think of another situation which was similar to the Photoshop situation, where there was someone up for promotion and the promotion committee noticed some things that were not quite right about some of the figures in one of the publications. So I've been somewhat exposed to situations where people did not behave ethically.
Those have got to be very uncomfortable situations for everyone involved,
Oh,
I'm sure.
Extremely. I think, particularly when I had one student who had some major plagiarism and had to leave our program because of it. It was, very, very wrenching.
Right. And then our other question, like I said, it's kind of related, and it says, what should a person do if they're aware of an unethical practice occurring?
Right, good question. What you do if you're aware of an unethical practice. I know here at the university, they have guidelines for people that one should consult. I think often, and I also do editing and teach editing, and so sometimes, like when we're editing something, there's something suspicious. So I guess I like to first, in a non-judgmental way, approach the person, because maybe something that seems fishy, there's a good reason for. So, I might say, I noticed, that this paragraph, an awful lot like this paragraph here, maybe you could explain the situation, and then, then they may say, oh my goodness, I forgot to change this, thing like that. If there's a continuing problem, then usually there are specific people, let's say a department head or other people, to tell the person. But I usually try not to jump to conclusions, because maybe I was wrong. But I think with the Aggie Honor Code, which is, and do not tolerate those who do, it indicates that one shouldn't just sit back and say, well, as long as I don't do anything unethical, it's okay.
Yeah. And then we have one last one. They want to know, when you report an unethical practice happening, is there a chance that your own career or status could be in jeopardy?
Right, wow, that is a very good question, whether your own career or status might be in jeopardy if you report something. And sometimes people who report these kinds of things, the word sometimes is called whistleblower. If you're a whistleblower, I mean, sometimes there is, there's a way that one can anonymously report it, particularly if there are specific channels and they will not reveal. Other times, it becomes, clear who it would be, and I think that can be a sticky situation. I mean, in a good situation, there will be people who will support you for doing the right thing, but I think that can be a consideration, particularly, you know, if the person who has done the wrongdoing, let's say, is not a peer, but maybe someone in power. So that is a tricky situation, and that would make for another good case in here. And I think there may be some of the cases in the resources that relate to this.
Deal with that. Well, that is all the questions we have for today, and it's about all the time we have as well. So we certainly thank you for joining us today, and we thank you, Dr. Gastel, for this wonderful presentation, and hope that a lot of you have experienced a little more about what ethics are and how we behave ethically when we're doing research or writing publications, things like that for our sciences. If you'd like to learn more about science or other STEM-related activities, careers, resources, lessons, we invite you to visit our website. It's peer, P-E-E-R, at tamu.edu. And next week, we'll all be enjoying Thanksgiving here. But the following week, we will look forward to seeing you as Dr. Johnson presents Anatomy and Physiology. So y'all have a happy Thanksgiving, and we'll see you in a week.
Yes, wishing you an excellent Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining me today.